The following is brought to you by the PLD Projects Network. It's me. It's PLD. PLD. PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
I love numbers, but you know what I love even more? We were having this conversation earlier, and we were listening to an after show talking about the Schmodown, and they were talking about all the question writing and stuff we've been doing lately, right? And it was really cool.
Yes,
and like Christian was there, and he was kind of giving us some love for the things we were doing. But he said something that I really have to take umbrage with. He called me a nerd, like a movie nerd. And he was like,
how dare he?
How dare he? Because he was saying that sometimes I would write things that no one would know but me and you. And then tonight you reminded me sometimes that's actually true.
That's highly accurate, actually.
It's entirely accurate because I was joking, but not really, about wanting to write a question involving George Clooney and the fact that he was in Return to Horror High. And you were like, no one but you and I have seen that movie. You realize that, right? Yeah, you're not wrong.
I will say I want to thank PJ Campbell for being here tonight. He had the opportunity to go to his local theater to watch Return to Horror High.
It's true.
The classic, iconic 1987 horror comedy. And yet he chose to spend his time with me talking about the Curse of Llorona.
Oh, is that what we're here to do?
That is what we're here to do.
Shit.
We're not doing an episode on Return to Horror High. Maybe that could happen someday. Maybe that'll be one of our one-offs we'll do.
Okay, can I tell you, do you remember the first time you saw the trailer for Return to Horror High? Do you remember the trailer? No, okay. The trailer is so great because it's like this long hallway in a high school, and like the camera's going down and the guy's doing this voiceover, and it's like 20 years ago, something really terrible happened here. And like it's very 80s and it's kind of fun, and like it goes into the gym and there's a cheerleader and she's got her back to the camera and she's like doing little cheerleading moves or whatever, and then she turns and it's the skull for the face.
Skull, right?
Yeah. And it's such a great thing. So they actually played the trailer at the Loft down here because Mondo Monday is a thing that they do here, and it's always like right now, because Mondo Mondays has returned, they usually do a theme for the month. And so because Mondo Mondays is coming back for the first time since the pandemic, everything they're doing is movies that are returns. So like the very first one they did, and I sent you pictures while I was there because I was so stoked, because I got to see Return of the Living Dead on the big screen.
Right.
I love Return of the Living Dead. That's so good.
Good for you.
But they did trailers for a couple of the ones that were coming up, and one of them was the Return to Horror High, and then the other one was Return of Swamp Thing.
Ooh.
Yeah, they did Return to Swamp Thing.
These are a lot of great classics right now we're talking about.
You got
classics
right.
To only a few people, but they are classics nonetheless.
Cult classics in particular.
Yes, exactly.
Return to Swamp Thing's real bad. I just want to throw it out there. It's real bad.
It is not the greatest. You are correct.
It's so different than the movie that they made the first time. Like,
right.
Wes Craven directed the first one, and then the second movie happened.
And that was not Wes Craven.
It was not just that. It was the what happened with RoboCop 3 of like they made a animated series between the movies, right. And they were like, well, shit, we sold this to kids. We can't make the scary things or like the dark versions that we were doing. Guess we'll PG them. And that's
Return to Horror High. I'd never do that. I tell you that much.
Goddamn right. Did you? Now I want to get back to my point real quick about Return to Horror High. So the first time I saw that trailer, I did not realize. I always thought it was a sequel because
it
makes sense, Return to Horror High and like the way that it was always sold. I really believed for the longest time it was a legacy sequel. I don't know why in my head, and so I would until I was like a younger teen. I was always looking for Horror High. and I could never understand.
Never found it,
and I never
you
found
poor
it.
bastard.
But
you're still looking.
I am, but I'll say this: the important thing is that means, technically speaking, we could make a
legacy prequel.
Oh, wait, dude! There is a Horror High. I've never seen this. It really is a legacy sequel. I did not dive deep enough into this. I don't think.
Really,
I'm having a moment.
Where are you seeing this?
On IMDb, 1973 Horror High. So it really was. So I've just never seen it. I clearly did not do enough research on this in this moment.
I guess it does not even have a wiki page, just so you know.
Does it really not?
I don't see anything about a wiki page in here. So
Return to Horror High really is kind of like actually...
Yeah, it's just every time I type Horror High in there, it always brings me to Return to Horror High.
That's so interesting.
It is. It's very interesting. We missed out on
seeing
what George Clooney
really
looks like.
Like, if it actually is.
This is riveting programming.
It really is. Sorry, I think it's more of a riff off of it, so I don't think it's an actual prequel. That's at least how I'm reading it.
Okay, that makes sense. That does make sense. Maybe like they just like the title. They probably just like the title.
Yeah,
and they didn't want to call it Horror High because they didn't want to make it like people think it's the same. Because back then, you didn't call your movie. You didn't call Scream 5 Scream. You didn't call Halloween 2018 Halloween. You actually went, I don't want to name it the same movie. People might get confused or something. So we Return to Horror High.
Yeah. Well, I'm seriously sitting here now back to where I was kind of at, where I'm like, man, we could make a really cool prequel about Horror High.
We could.
Basically is what I was getting at. Sorry that I like.
That's a show.
That was a
That's
weird
show
thing.
For someday. We could actually make the show pitching legacy sequels or legacy prequels. That's what we talk about off air. We might do that.
I mean, you know what my dream project is. If I could make I don't know
if you want to divulge that on air though. At this point, do you? I mean, they don't want to give that away because that's gold. You actually could strike gold with that one.
Yeah, but who are we? How am I going to get into that room?
That's true.
Someone at Universal needs to call me, but I'm just going to say, Graduates Take Manhattan.
His DMs are open.
My DM. Calling. Yeah, Universal Studios, if you need anyone, PLD and I are your people. You give us a call. We'll make it work. Have we derailed this episode enough?
Already. For 7 minutes, we've even talked about the fact that we're watching a non-Conjuring Universe movie in our Conjuring Universe watch-through.
I hate this stuff.
I just. By the way, I just want to let you guys know, PJ is boiling already. And I could see him about ready to go off. Like, he has a very strong rant. We were recording this on Monday. You might have seen on Twitter. He made a tweet on Monday about this. He's very angry. I understand his anger. I'm not quite as angry about it. He's very passionate about it. He's very vehement. I do think it's funny. I'm amused by it. But let's get right into it. The Curse of Llorona. I like to say it that way. I don't know why.
No, I'm sorry. You're saying it wrong. As I tweeted out today, it is The Conjuring Universe presents The Curse of Llorona.
But that is not what director Michael Chavis says. Michael Chavis says, and I quote, "The very simple reason why La Llorona isn't part of the Conjuring universe is because it was made without one of the Conjuring franchise producers. So technically it cannot be fully embraced. That's the very simple reason. Originally, there was only supposed to be a playful nod to the Conjuring franchise by putting the father in and having the Annabelle flash, but it wasn't supposed to be marketed that way. The plan was you would get into it, and then it's like, oh my God, they're connected. We weren't from the beginning supposed to be doing that, and that's why it has its outsider status. But the character La Llorona is an outsider herself. I think it fits. The idea was to have a playful connection because the myth of La Llorona can stand on its own. But James was on a producer. The conversation got started about an Easter egg. It just kind of got away from itself. People love the connection. But the Conjuring franchises are created by a team that's been there since the beginning. It's not really right to do an official spin-off without the full team. But let me digress and say right away, let me go back to the middle of that long paragraph that I read.
Is that the James Wan is involved?
It's James. Actually, you know that. The plan was you get into it, and then it's like, oh my God, they're connected.
So why are we pretending then, for whatever reason, that The Curse of La Llorona is not a Conjuring movie when you actually use footage from one of the films in this universe within your own film. That's not a playful nod. That's literally connecting your projects.
One producer not being on the film, one of them, means it can't be in the universe. I'm sorry. Does every MCU film have every same producer on for every? I mean, I know Kevin Feige's involved with all of them, but it's like every single producer on every single film.
And even then, who's your major producer on this one? James Wan?
James Wan. It's not like, it's like if Kevin Feige wasn't on this on my MCU film, then it's kind of a separate issue. James Wan wasn't on this, then I go, okay, you have a little bit of more ground to stand on at this point.
I just don't understand. I don't understand why, in a world where we're dealing with cinematic universes like on a daily basis, this movie seems like the weirdest hill to die on, to be like, look, we know that this movie is a movie we made, and it's got some of the same people in it, and yeah, we definitely have a character we share and footage from the other movies, but we're not connected. Like, why are you not embracing it? It just seems so odd.
And I'm going to say it right here, this might be a spoiler towards the end of our episode here. I believe, and we'll get into the weirs and we'll figure out by the end, I believe I like this a little less than you. To me, I'm saying this is not a good enough movie to stand on its own without the connection. Like, no. I'm saying this is like, and I don't think it's a bad movie, but like, this is not like this was like a premium, amazing horror film that had so much to say and was shot perfectly. It was a great cast, everything was great about it, and it could stand on its own. Okay. This is a mainly run-of-the-mill horror film with some good stuff in it, with some good performances in it, some great actors, some good shots, some good connective tissue. But it works much better if it's part of an overall whole. You're not going to go back and watch it. It's like watching, for example, would you really watch, I don't know, Friday the 13th Part 5 if it wasn't in the Friday the 13th saga kind of thing? No, because it's a shitty movie, but because it's there, we don't want to skip it and we watch the whole Friday franchise. This is how you get your movie watched.
It's so odd to me. It makes no sense, and the more I think about it, it's just more confounding because, to your point, if you're telling people it's involved, they're gonna watch your movie.
Yes.
I know part of the reason I went to see it was because I saw that Tony Amendola was in it playing the same character. That, to me, was, hey, I should probably check this out. Because, again, to your point, this is pretty run-of-the-mill as far as these movies go. And not just that, like...
It's fun.
If the other argument is, well, look, the Conjuring movies are based on real events. Yeah, but guess what? Not a single one of the spin-offs is based on a true story event.
Right.
They've 100% created their own world and creations out of these.
And it's not like Chavis had like some kind of falling out or something kind of falling out with the team. And like, if you want to say, you know what, I don't want to be associated with X. I don't like. He went on to direct the third Conjuring film.
Well,
the main crew went on to do it.
Also, I kind of think that his little interview blurb thing doesn't really make sense either, because it's also been talked about that one of the original endings involved the father character to go say he was basically going to see the Warrens. Like, he was going to reference it. And
that's actually that's intimated in this film at one point.
But apparently,
because he says at one point, we'll get to it. Tom goes, there are people that you got to go to the church, or church have people that look into this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
that intimates me in the Warrens
100%. But apparently, it was like a very overt. He was going to see them after the event.
Gotcha.
But that's kind of my point is, again, when did we draw the line on these cinematic universe things where it's like, well, no, not really. No.
Like, it's the only thing that, like, even makes a weird, like, amount of, again, this doesn't make any sense, but it's the only thing I can think of that, like, maybe this was some kind of weird thought process from a broken brain, if you ask me. But, like, you have The Curse of La Llorona comes out in 2019. You also have Annabelle Comes Home come out in 2019. Was this some kind of weird thing to like try to prevent like dilution, like to prevent like oversaturation? Like they say Star Wars getting oversaturated with Solo perhaps going out too soon after The Last Jedi, so they want to have this as a standalone horror movie or something like that. And they said, well, Annabelle Comes Home already has movies about it, so that can't be the one. We'll take The Curse of La Llorona and just put it on the outside, maybe looking at
it just seems so odd. It does. It's a weird choice. I don't really understand it because, again, every part of this, and we'll even get into it, the movie itself is DNA'd strict and straight from all the movies around it. Like, it shares
100%.
so much of the same style of filmmaking, because that's clearly the style of filmmaking that Juan once brought into these movies, and it's got, like, similar tracking shots. The whole thing feels like it. There's a reason that Michael Chavez ended up doing The Conjuring 3. Like, to your point, he didn't get it for no reason.
Right. Exactly. There's I don't want to quote the great Randy Meeks from Scream, but there's a simple formula to these films to a degree.
Right.
And it's not a break for it, but there is a formula that's used, and it's still used in this film as well. It just used a little differently here and there, but not enough to take it out of the universe.
No, it just seems weird. So basically what we're getting at here is that the soapbox is, at the end of the day, don't tell us the thing that we're looking at isn't the thing that we're looking at when we can clearly see it's the thing that we're looking at. It is a weird hill for WB trying to be like, no, this movie doesn't exist in this universe when you're using footage from other movies. I'm not saying that it's like an essential part of this universe, but I'm also not saying that it's not. And I think that it's worth at least checking out. And we'll kind of get into my final thoughts later. But this weird kind of distancing thing makes no sense. Just be honest. Yes, it's part of the universe.
I guess the only other thing I'll point out maybe is I didn't look into it. I don't know who is missing from the team that wasn't involved at all.
Right.
But unless like he made some kind of really like selfish like
deal.
Try to make some kind of selfish stand and was like, you know what, I'm not involved. It's not the fucking Conjuring, and I'm not gonna. I'll make us think about it if you whatever or something. I mean, I don't know why he would necessarily, but maybe he didn't like the movie, didn't want his name on it, and so he doesn't want to associate it with it or something. Maybe it's something along those lines. It's the only thing I can think of that makes any kind of like real sense.
Yeah.
But either way, it doesn't matter. To quote The Rock, it don't matter. It doesn't matter what you say it is, because it is Conjuring Universe.
Yep.
Okay.
And from now on, we will refer to it as The Conjuring Universe presents The Curse of La
Llorona. I do think we got most of our anger out here. It's good. So we'll try not to let it like completely saturate throughout this conversation. I do know it's going to come up at least twice more. At least twice more. We're going to get to scenes. But let's try to go on now. We're assuming it's the Conjuring Universe. That's why we're doing it in our franchise watch through. Let's start with this film now.
Yeah. So what's interesting about this one, when it was originally announced as a film, it was called The Children. It wouldn't become known until like a year later, basically, that it was being renamed to be The Curse of La Llorona. If I remember correctly, this was announced at Comic-Con, essentially. And they had brought footage with them from this film, The Conjuring 3, and Annabelle Comes Home, if I'm remembering correctly. And so in that's when it was revealed that this movie that Juan was producing this whole time, called The Children, was actually a movie called The Curse of La Llorona. They were really going to lean in on trying to do something a little different. But again, and this was presented at a Conjuring panel. So it just goes in more to what we're talking about with all of this. But
that wasn't one of the two guys, just saying. It wasn't one of the two. Sorry.
No, sorry. But it's just very interesting. And so this movie comes out 2019. So 2 years down the road, we finally get the movie. It's a pretty small budgeted film, $9 million. So it's kind of playing in the realm of those, first two Annabelle films. Makes $123 million, and that's not being sold as like a Conjuring film, so that's pretty good for itself, to be honest. Which is why I'm surprised, to this point, we really haven't heard anything about them trying to do another, even though the movie kind of leaves it open for one.
It definitely does. Yeah, it definitely leaves it open for one. The last shot is a definitive, open-ended speak there. But at the same time, I don't think I need another one, I'll be honest with you.
Oh, no. I just mean a successful horror film normally.
No, I get it.
Capitalizing.
That'd be the last one I'd want a sequel to at this point, I think, though. I think at this point, I haven't seen Annabelle Creation yet, so maybe I'll or Annabelle Comes Home, rather. I haven't seen that one yet, so we'll have to, maybe that one will be worse in my mind. But this is not, and that's this is the worst film by far in the franchise at all. Annabelle does exist. But this isn't the one I was excited about for making like a next journey with at this point. I kind of had my fill of it and we're good, I think. But we'll get there. So we'll get there towards the end. This one obviously opens up. The film opens in 1673.
What an interesting
like that
time to jump into.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't expecting that at all. That's a good thing about the Conjuring. It's universe and generally intensely. You don't know exactly where you're going to start in some of these films. So we had a movie, then we had a prequel to the movie, then we had a prequel to the prequel of the movie, and then we had to jump to, where are we? I have no idea where we are. But 1673 is not where I expected to start, although we don't get to stay there very long. We're in Mexico, and it's a beautiful opening shot. Like, the shot just looks very, very, very nice. And I didn't know what to expect from it. Especially after the darkness of the nun, which fit the nun better, I think, in a way. But so it's definitely like, okay, we're in a different place now. It
might be one of the most brightly lit shots in the entire universe. It might be the brightest, if I'm honest.
Agreed.
And it's kind of disarming in a way because it feels so warm, which is the point. Like, I think I even mentioned it to you when we were texting a little bit when I was watching it. I hadn't seen this since I had seen it in theaters. So it'd been a little while since I really sat down to even think about it in any greater capacity. And I didn't really remember the opening being so beautiful and kind of just very vivid, which makes the very dark turn that it takes so awesome. Because it's, if you don't know the story of Llorona, you may not know the twist that it's about to take, assuming that you didn't see any of the trailers or anything. Like, this is a pretty well-known supernatural type of story for certain people. I didn't hear the Llorona stuff because I want to say this is a Hispanic,
a cultural
type story that I didn't really ever hear. But there is a lot of people who have.
Right. And it made it quite clear that a lot of people, I remember when I watched this movie, I talked about it a little bit afterwards. I talked to some people who had heard of the curse before, had heard this character. Or whatever. So I was like, oh, okay. There's like actually even a previous movie on it. Like in 2007, there was a curse of La Llorona from, it's not related at all, but so it shows you right there, though, that it is something that's come up before.
Yeah, and then Shudder just did a movie last year, I think, if I'm remembering, which was also a La Llorona film that was very different. It's very, very cool, but it's a very different movie. That one is a much more like methodically paced kind of take on the character and the world.
Right.
Worth checking out if you get a chance.
All right, fair enough.
But you're right. It's beautiful, and you see her out on this hike, and she's with her kids, and then it looks like everyone's having this great time, and then she, drowns one of the boys. Then she grabs the other son, and we don't see it happen, but the implication is obviously she also murdered him.
Right. Makes sense.
And we jump 300 years into the future.
Boom, 1973. And there we get a very Conjuring-like introduction to a family.
Yep.
A needle drop, family all getting together. Obviously.
Going to the house. Like, this was the scene I was talking about that immediately I was like, you're telling me this isn't a Conjuring film? This is straight out of the James Wan playbook. You put the camera in, you follow each one of the family members kind of specifically in moments, so you get to know them a little bit and you get to know their dynamic through it. This needle drop gets you kind of grooving with the movie. It's a very smart way to introduce these characters. And agreed. I was glad that they did it here because this is not a movie with a very big cast, and you get little ticks from all of them in these moments that made me get on board with their relationships pretty quickly.
Right. It was a great way of doing some character development without having to do a whole lot of actual, talking or character development. You're right away, this is obviously something happened to the husband because he's not around. You figure something happened that way. The kids are who they are. Obviously, the older one's a little bit more, I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but he's a little more assertive of things. And the daughter is obviously a little bit more of a dreamer. Linda Cardellini, who, God, I love
all the time.
Linda
She's
Cardellini.
the best. This is a stand-up for Linda Cardellini.
100%. 100%. And she does great in this film. Like the negatives I have with this film, none of it falls at her feet.
No, she's just so good in this, man. She really is.
And right away, I feel for her. There's something about her as an actress that she has a vulnerability about her. It's a strength. It's definitely a strength, but it always feels like she plays these characters who are definitely going through some shit, but are going to overcome it because she's fucking strong. Yeah. Strong as hell. It's why she actually served perfect in the MCU and Hawkeye as a wife for there as well too, because it made sense that way. Mm-hmm. But I like her here in this
stuff in the MCU. Like,
oh yeah,
sorry, this is like a little tangential, but she's just so good. Like, she doesn't get a lot to do.
She makes the most of her time. That's the thing. And I think it's kind of interesting to see. You don't get to see her very often in like leading roles like this too, where she gets a little more time to sink into it, and it's for the better. I feel like she needs more roles. I want to see her in more things.
I do too.
Even more horror movies, even just dramatic roles, even potentially. But I'm a big fan there. So again, love how it begins. But we are introduced next to her job. She's obviously a caseworker. She does works with like CPS or something to that effect.
Check type
welfare
stuff.
Check. Yeah, right. Truancy checks. And again, the story actually does a good job introducing the characters and doing some expedient exposition. Like, for example, you learn quickly that, okay, the boss is saying he's supportive and he's trying to be supportive, but he's really not. It's a tough life because she's a single mom living with 2 kids, whereas the girl near her, or the girl in the same office, she doesn't have any responsibilities at home. So she's like the worker of the two. And it's a great dynamic. It also puts some more pressure on Linda Cardellini's character. Here we are. We know she does good by her family. She knows that she seems like she's a good worker, but she's got to make that balance work.
Oh, yeah. And I love this whole thing. And I got to shout out, by the way, the guy who plays her boss, John Marshall Jones. I've been a big fan of that guy for the longest time because I loved Smart Guy back in the day with Ari.
That's what he was from. That's right. I remember. I remember he's one of those guys watching. I know this guy from somewhere, and I should have looked him up, but I just didn't get a chance to. That's right. He was on Smart Guy. That's true.
Yeah. So he's just a character actor that I always enjoy seeing him in things. But like they very quickly set up the dynamic of there's clearly been a tragedy in this family.
Right.
Things have happened. They're still kind of coping with all of it, but she's doing what she does. She's trying her best. She's grinding her teeth. And, the boss thinks he's trying to be more helpful by saying, look, we're trying to take this stuff off your plate. We believe in you. But also, you need to get it together because you're not showing up to work on time. So part of this is to take care of you. But the other part of it is we're protecting ourselves.
Yeah, a little bit of both. And it's the 1970s, too. This is not a very... this is not a very advanced time as far as that goes, especially with women in the workforce at that point as well. But it's, again, all done in a quick amount of time. We introduce the situation. Okay, she's got a little more pressure on her. Now we move on to where we go, and she gets the job that was given away to Irene, her coworker there. She gets it back because she makes a strong case that Patricia Alvarez knows her. They worked with her for years. So she's the one who's got to talk to them. And the kids aren't showing up at school. They got to check out what's going on. And so she goes with a cop by the boss's orders to go to Patricia's house and find out what's going on with her apartment and with a cop to find out where they are. Again, another little quite quick bit of exposition there. You find out, okay, the cops basically lets them know that, well, I can't let you go in alone because, your husband's a cop. Your husband was a cop. I'm like my partner, not my partner per se, but like I worked with him. Yeah. I can't let him do that. I got to honor his memory. Again, great small bits of exposition dropping along the way. Oh, so that's the tragedy. He was a cop and he was killed. Yep. Or he got into some kind of accident or whatever.
Something happened.
Great. Here we are.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So that put pressure on her and put pressure on the kids.
Yeah, and I like this establishment early on that Linda Cardellini's character of Anna has this relationship with Patricia Velasquez's Patricia Alvarez.
Right.
And by the way, Patricia Velasquez is so great. I've liked her since The Mummy and The Mummy Returns. Like, those are the things that I think most people will recognize her from. She's such a fun actress, and she can be very intense, and I think that this role is so great for her because it's a very intensive character. There's no fun to be had with the way she is or the things that she's been dealing with. And so these moments when we first meet her with Linda Cardellini, it's very off-putting because it's very tense. There's something wrong, and she just portrays it in such a manically depraved way, but it feels so internal.
Right.
It's not an outwards version of it, that if that makes sense. Like, it's a clear internal battle. She's just playing it off so well, she's trying to protect her kids.
Right. And we don't know that at first. Right. That's the cool thing about it. Later on, much later in the film, we kind of go, oh, God, this is what she was doing. And it makes sense. Like, part of your initial thought as an audience member is, well, tell them what's going on. Make them understand. Make them believe it. When you're in the situation, like, well, they're not going to believe me. They're not going to get it. And it makes for having to watch her go through this and having Anna, Linda Cardellini, watch her go through this and then go through something similar makes it an effective use of raising the tension and raising the stakes for Anna at that point. It's a really cool sequence.
It's just a good sequence.
She's great there. I love one of my favorite parts about it is the times where, again, less is more sometimes, and confusion. You can, when an audience can see where the confusion lies, and you're like, oh, it's frustrating to the audience.
Right.
Like, she gets the door open. She finds the locked door. She gets the door open despite Patricia attacking her. The cop gets her out, and she talks to the sons, and the sons are like, oh, they're hurt, they're scared, and the one son, I forget which one, says, the younger one, I think, goes, close the door, she'll hurt us. Mm-hmm. And Linda Cardellini and everybody else thinks they're talking about Patricia, because what else could it be in their mind? But the audience members knows already. You're like, it's not Patricia. It's not Patricia. We know this. God damn it.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the things that some people get irritated with in a movie like this is, like, you're kind of villainizing someone who the audience already knows is not the villain. But I think it actually goes a long way in creating tension, because the people around her don't want to believe it, because they don't want to believe that something supernatural could be happening around them.
Right.
And I think that there's a really interesting way of building around that, because everyone looks at her like she's crazy. Now you're going to experience that. And I think that seeing, like, that downward spiral and that kind of, like, collision course in that way is interesting.
Right. It is. All right, so we get the two boys in, and she interviews them, and you see the marks on the younger one's arm, and everything else. And it's all set up, and we're still kind of frustrated. We know what's going on to a degree. We know it's not Patricia anyway, but we don't get a chance to do much with it. But the best part is, or the most scary part is that we get to see the boys. The older one, Tomas, sleepwalks. Carlos follows him, and we get our first real shot of the current La Llorona in the mirror. The mirror cracks, and then she comes and attacks them.
Yeah.
Now, the next thing we find out is that Linda gets awakened by a call, and the boys were pulled from the river, dead. That right there threw me, because killing kids in a movie doesn't often happen. And not even in a lot of horror movies. It's kind of like one of those kind of like
taboo.
No. It's still taboo to a degree. And not only that, but so this film let us get to know these kids a little bit. Get to feel so it's not even just like a random kid.
Yeah.
It's kids we got to know for a scene or two. We're starting to feel for a scene or two. And we almost were thinking, I mean, at least I was anyway, I was thinking we were going to follow these kids throughout the movie, and that would end up being like a Conjuring situation. It would be like maybe Linda Cardellini with her kids and with Patricia's kids, and figure it out. So all of a sudden, boom, they're dead. And that threw me a lot. I don't know about you.
Yeah, honestly, because even though the movie had already primed us very early on that kids were clearly not off limits, because that's the story and that's where it starts.
Right.
I did not anticipate meeting a group of kids that we would see killed like this movie's first victim. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like every movie that you watch that's a horror movie, there's always the first victim, and I didn't expect it to be kids. So it does throw me a little bit. And this whole sequence, what's kind of interesting is that the Conjuring movies, for the most part, are very contained. They've always kind of been in houses and things like that.
Right.
The movie actually takes us out of that a little bit. And so to see them in like Los Angeles feels a little strange in a interesting way.
Agreed. It's very interesting that way.
Yeah. And so in this moment, when she shows up and they find the kids and, you know, she's looking at the bodies, she had to bring her kids with her. Probably because she's a single mom. You can't leave the kids home alone. So the kids are asleep in the car, but her son wakes up and decides to go peek at what's happening. And this is what's, I thought, done very well, in my opinion, is that this moment, he's kind of looking down. He's seeing what happened to these kids. It's tense. You can feel for him. And there's a little bit of the red and blue from the lights of the cop cars. And you hear crying.
Right.
And as
faintly,
the audience, you're like, shit. You know. And this is
what that means.
The best use of jump scare in this entire movie comes in this moment. And it's the one that I think is the most well done, is that as he's watching and he sees her, Llorona starts talking to him, and, you know, she starts moving towards him, and it's super creepy, and, like, the shot lingers, and she goes into a shadow, and then another Llorona, the Llorona, comes from the other side of the screen and grabs him. And it's so intense. I really loved the way that it was handled.
I like that as well. I actually will say one of the creepiest things as well also was right before that, when he goes up and follows the crying trail, and all of a sudden, like, you see Llorona in the distance a little bit.
Right.
Through the gate or whatever, and she just, like, turns.
And the cracking sound.
And you're looking right at him, you're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Ah, shit. But yeah, this is actually handled very well. That was, I agree, it's the best jump scare of the movie. I will say, I'm going to say it right now, one of my problems with this movie is it seems like Chavez just relies way too heavily on jump scares. He's
much more show than tell. We had this conversation a little bit, but while we were both watching it, and I think the way I said it is he loves the build, but he doesn't like to hold on it. He likes to build and go straight for the scare.
Right.
Which can be fine once or twice, but when you keep doing it, it becomes repetitive, and there was moments that I wish that this movie had held back more.
It deflates the tension that way. It goes too much for it. We see La Llorona too much in this film, I feel. Like, way too much.
I agree.
And, like, the more you see her, the less power she has. Like, you compare, like, the greatest comparison I have is between her, La Llorona, and, like, the Nun. And I'm talking about both in The Nun and in The Conjuring 2. The Nun character, Valak, or whatever, so much more freaky. And it's not just the design, it's the fact that it's just, your imagination can do so much more than any monster ever really could. Well, and the hint is what they do best for Valak. Over two movies, I think I saw less of Valak than I saw of La Llorona through this entire movie.
I think that there's something to be said about the way that they could have done things in this movie without relying on actually seeing her, because I don't think they ultimately play enough with this idea of her being like the weeping ghost. There's not enough of that. It's always seeing her. It's all like, we don't spend enough time building the tension around her. That's why this first moment with her is so great, because it's chilling. It's scary.
Right.
And then we just keep seeing her with no build.
Right. And it just pop out. It almost actually feels like, and I almost hate saying this because I love it, but it feels almost like a Supernatural episode on the CW rather than a feature film. And I love Supernatural, so this is not trying to be a slam, because like, it's Supernatural done well. It does, when they do it well, they do it very well at times. But this just felt not exciting enough at times.
Well, this kind of comes down to the Jaws of it all, right?
No.
Horror movies have learned since Jaws, because of all the problems that they had and Spielberg having to be innovative, he could find ways to make it scary still. And he didn't have to show the monster at all times. And I think that the more that you do that, Alien's another example. You don't see the xenomorph a ton in the first Ridley Scott Alien movie. When you do, 100%. It's intense and
so effective.
Right. The best horror films know not to lean on it. Right. I mean, don't get me wrong, slasher movies eventually only lean on it, and that's a little bit different. But when it comes to something like this that's a little more supernatural, take your time with it. Like, you don't have to show every single frame. Like, there's a great moment in this movie where Linda Cardellini's daughter is outside next to the pool.
Oh, God, I was going to wait till we get there, but yes, I get it.
I'm just kind of getting into it now because this moment is so great when it first starts because she's outside near the water and she has this umbrella.
Clear umbrella.
It's a clear umbrella, and she pops it open, and Llorona, you can see her through the umbrella, but you can't see her outside of it.
Right.
And it's such an eerie, creepy moment that I wish had not continued to keep going, because eventually, like, she closes it, and then it, like, pulls out of her hand, and it's making this really loud popping noise every time it gets hit. Like,
it blows, yeah.
Well, it's. I think it's also to be like, look, Llorona's messing with her, because it seems very...
Get her into the pool.
Right. And then it goes a step too far again, and then Llorona, like, pops off the side of the screen to grab her. And it's just... We saw too much now. We've gone too far.
I agree. And I know it needed to have, like... They need to have her arm get the marks on her, but there's just better ways that could have happened, I think. I don't think you need to see her to have it happen. You could just... You could have seen her through the umbrella, and then she could have gone away, and you could have, like, just cut to a sequence later where you see the arm marks.
Yeah.
And you know what happened, and we're like, and you see her being, like, petrified about it. You know, I think sometimes you can skip that kind of thing. Yeah, she got away somehow. Obviously, she got home.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've seen this happen. So, okay, what happens? We want to know more about it at that point. Leave them wanting more. That's the way it always should be. It's a cliche by now, but it works so well. And you mentioned slasher films. Slasher films are a different genre for a reason.
Right.
Like, that's the thing. Like, they become the superheroes of the film. You're almost rooting for the hero, almost rooting for the icons. You want Michael Myers to do the damage.
Yeah, like,
it's not about the scaring you. It's about how brutal, how gory can he do? How much can he? How many people can he kill in a certain amount of time? It's almost like an action movie rather than a horror movie.
No, it absolutely is, and that's kind of one of the things that we see a lot with movies like these. Like, that's why with this one, I really wish we saw her less, because you're not rooting for Llorona in this. Llorona is the villain. You're supposed to be rooting for Linda Cardellini as Anna, and I want to spend more time with them and less them running from the popping out monster. If that makes
Agreed,
sense.
100%.
Okay.
Agreed. To cut back really quick before, because we don't want to skip a couple of things here. Back to the scene where the boys are running from the river. Patricia's brought out, and she curses, or she yells at Linda, rather, at Anna. I keep saying, I just call her Linda the whole time, because she's always Linda, kind of leaning for me. And that's the first time we hear that she didn't do it, and that was Llorona who did it, or whatever, and she's intrigued. And like all good people would be at this moment, and this is where you see that Linda Cardellini is a great person. She's not going to blow it off. She's kind of like, interesting.
Yeah.
I know this family. I know Patricia. This didn't seem to like her. What is this she's talking about? I mean, even if it's of the concept, maybe she thinks that Patricia's just gotten mentally ill or something's gone off with her. She still wants to see what happened. So that leads us to our next big scene. And the reason why it is the Conjuring universe presents The Curse of La Llorona. She goes and visits the memorial. We got our first shot, first of all, of Raymond Cruz's character, Raphael.
Yep.
Who is honestly, I think he might be my favorite part of the movie.
Oh, he's absolutely mine, probably. Like, I love this character.
got such a dry sense of humor, and like he's such an asshole at times. Like he's a former priest. I guess what I like about it too, it's something new and different. It's a twist. Like usually it's the priest from the Catholic Church comes, or it's like Damien Bashir, like a priest who's having trouble or something. There's a guy who's just not involved anymore. He's like, yep. He has a great line at some point, something about you don't need to. Or actually, I think the Father might have the line. That might be Perez. Yeah, Perez has the line. I'm sorry. Father Perez has the line when he says you don't have to be religious to have faith.
Right.
But it's about him, and I felt that too because I kind of actually feel that way too. I'm a very spiritual person, but I hate religion. So Raymond embodies that, and you don't get to see that side of things very often. It's usually the evil and the church or the good.
Well, that's what I was going to say is one of the, and you kind of brought it up, is that I almost love that he's the other side of what happens to Damien Bouchier, right?
Right,
so
exactly.
In The Nun, we get the version of Damien Bouchier is the dude who is really battling that, and then sides on the side of keeping with the faith, keeping with the religion, and, getting through that.
And to interject with there, also Taissa Farmiga in The Nun,
right,
who is questioning her faith as well. She hasn't been there and questioning. She's questioning it, and she makes that commitment. It is the church is going to be the superpower because I am the good in the church, and I am going to be the good of the church and helping out. And Raymond has been there, and he's like, no, I don't like. He's like, you have problems with the church? Church, yes. God, no.
Right. And I like that.
Whatever.
I really like the dichotomy of that because I think we're seeing a very different person of faith. And there was the line I think that Perez uses where he even says the idea that, Raphael is essentially when God meets science. Like he's a dude who is kind of using the things around him that he can think of to help with the faith side of protecting people. It's just such an interesting thing. And it's also a little bit of opposite of the Warrens. Like the Warrens also operate outside of the church in a similar fashion, but
with the church to degree. Yeah.
Yes. And that's the thing is that Raphael's is not like he's kind of looking for this stuff, whereas the Warrens are dragged into it a little different.
Right. And the big difference is they're the priests, like Father Perez mentions. I love Father Perez as a character, and I've always loved him. I love him. He's the few really good things.
Amendola forever.
Amendola, exactly. His character tells Anna that maybe you should go see Raphael, even though he's quick to say also, like, if you do this, I have to let you know I have to withdraw and I cannot help you. The church cannot help you because they don't recognize him. So even though he knows that he's going against the church, he knows that he might be able to help out the family and do it quicker.
Right.
Because that's how great of a guy Father Perez is. He knows that, like, he's that guy that he's not blindly into the church. Loves the church, obviously. He's still a big part of it. Loves working with the Warrens. Loves that side of things, but also goes, you know what? My job, as it always has been, is to help this person out.
Right.
And the best way I can do that, I think Raphael might be the best way to do that.
Yeah, and that's that makes him a man of faith in a very different way, is that he's trying to put you in the right place to get the help you need. And I think it's a great character building moment for him, and he only has 2 scenes in this movie altogether, but they're both impactful. And again, this becomes why are you pretending this is not in this universe thing? Because 2 of the best moments that you've gotten with this character are from a movie that were not the one he was originally in. And I think it's really important that his journey from that film was brought into this film. That's not like a fun wink and nod that just is supposed to be, oh, hey, look, it's cute and we're tied. No, you're using his story from one to directly affect this one.
This is not John McClane in National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon 1.
No, 100%. This is not John McClane popping into Loaded Weapon 1, which I watched again today. Where, like, it's clearly
this
John
character
McClane,
development,
but it's just for fun. It's not a character development thing. It's, hey, look, it's funny. Bruce Willis. Okay.
Right. And yes, I know Little Weapon's a spoof, so it's a different story entirely. But the point I'm making is the same, because this is actually character development, not just a fun cameo. We get more out of I think we get more out of Tony Amendola in this film and his character than we did in Annabelle.
100%. So. I mean, and again, I just like Tony Amendola. I just think he's a great talent, and so I'm happy to see him again. And I don't want this movie just being disregarded as not being a part of it by people, when it's like, no, there's some great stuff with the character that you met in one of these movies in this movie.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to say this now. It's kind of, I feel like this is the best place to say it. One of the, again, my favorite parts about the movie is the fact, and one that's definitely not any of the weaknesses that knocks it down for me, is the fact that they did cast this very well. You have Linda Cardellini in there. You have, the kids are decent for kid actors. Raymond Cruz is great at Raphael. You got Sean Patrick Thomas as Coop.
Yep.
You got, again, you mentioned Patricia Velasquez as Patricia Alvarez. Everybody is in there for a little bit. It seems. I mean, Linda's there, obviously, the whole thing. The kids are there the whole time. Everybody else who kind of comes and goes serve their purpose very well and are very good at what they do.
Yeah, Chavez is actually pretty good at balancing, and I think this is kind of the clear reason that they chose him to do a Conjuring film after. He seems to have the right fit of knowing where the focus needs to lie, but also letting every other character need to have its moments. And it's really kind of felt in this. And I'll say this, too. I think Chavez has some really incredible camera work. We kind of overlooked it in the sequences earlier in the movie, but there was the car sequence that I'm a really big fan of, the scene when her son goes back to the car after he's seen Llorona, and he's trying to roll up the window, and then like one would go down on its own. And the way that it's built is very tense, and there's moments like that where Chavez really stands out as a director. Because he makes you feel like the camera, and he's really built us into it. And I think that he could have done so much if he had just done so much less at moments, because I like those moments, and I'm going to keep bringing that up, but he's just so good.
I do wonder if he was trying to do too much because of a somewhat lacking script.
I mean, that could be true.
Because the story itself, it seemed very bare bones overall. There's not a whole lot to it. You find out, I mean, a lot of this, as you go from beat to beat to beat, it's just like, okay, when do they next see La Llorona? When do they next see La Llorona? We got a couple of excursions out. We get to when he's like meeting Raphael in his store at something, meeting with Father Perez or something. But a lot of it just seems to be like this very bullet point kind of film.
It's very much like the atypical B horror movie, where everything's just like very thinly laid out, and you're kind of right, bullet point filmmaking, if you will. And it's like, so this point A needs to get to this point A, and somewhere in between La Llorona is going to pop in, and then we're going to go from that point to that point. And that's fine, but
it almost seems fillerisk in some ways. Like, there's moments where, like, at the end, it's like, what's this movie's like 75 minutes long. Let's throw another La Llorona sequence in there just to fill it out a little bit to get to 90 minutes or whatever.
And that becomes a little bit more about substance over style. And that's kind of the biggest drawback of the whole thing, because the thing I really like about most of the Conjuring films, and that includes the spin-offs, is that they feel very character-heavy. This movie stops being character-heavy about 20 minutes in, and just becomes about how can we put La Llorona into this scene and make her come out.
Right.
And
which is why it's so amazing to me that the acting performances are as good as they are, because they don't have a lot to work with.
No.
It's really all about selling the characters that they do themselves.
You know why that is? People like Linda Cardellini and Raymond Cruz and Patricia Velasquez and Sean Patrick Thomas, Tony Amendola, like, we wax poetic a lot on this podcast, and even when we're working behind the scenes for the show, character actors carry everything that they're in a lot of times, because character actors come in, they build these characters who are not the leads, and you have to buy into them as quick as you buy into someone that you've spent an entire movie with. And those
character actors, I'm sorry.
Oh no, go. I was going to say, and in doing that, this movie is literally built on just character actors.
Yes.
Which means that all of them came into this going, we can bring the most out of these characters even with very little, because we know how to make a character like this tick, and that will win you over.
Character actors, what I was going to say, character actors is the probably least talked about, but almost most significant form of world building.
100%.
You can't have a world building without this. makes it, because you have your lead character, you have your protagonist, you probably have an antagonist, but it's the ones around them that make this world feel real and genuine, whether we give a fuck about it or not.
Yeah.
You can't give a fuck about a character if they don't interact with the world they're in, because then it just takes you right out. These actors are good. They're good, solid actors, and that's why I do care about what happens a little bit towards the end, much more than I would have without them. I tell you that much, because the story is not making me care about them whatsoever.
100%. I mean, look at almost anything you watch, right? And this is a weird way to talk about it, but you're right. You have to buy into these worlds, and they do such a great job of it. Look at the original Star Wars.
Right.
All the stuff
right,
on
right.
Tatooine with Beru and Lars, like, that is character acting at its finest. You feel the way that they feel in those moments, and the way that they're looking at Luke and like trying to protect him, but realizing they can't anymore. But they've seen some.
Phil Brown's line at Uncle Owen, when Aunt Peru says, she's got too much of his father in him. And he just takes that moment. He has one big line in the whole franchise, That's what I'm afraid of. And it works it laid the whole groundwork for the rest of the stories.
Exactly. And so that's why character acting is so important. And this movie, having people that are like that across the board, is the only reason this movie ultimately works.
Yeah. And it does work. Barely for me, but it does work.
Yeah.
I'll give you that much.
I think you and I actually like this movie probably close to the same. The more that we're talking about it, there's things that I enjoy in the flourishes of what Chavez is trying to do a lot of the time. But right. I also think that it is fundamentally the weakest film outside of the original Annabelle.
Okay.
It is better than Annabelle.
Oh, it's very much. I'd watch this one 3 times a week before I'd watch Annabelle again.
Yeah.
I'm also barring a completist thing of me. I am with OCD that way. I will say this film does a good job at the there's a Conjuring curse sometimes where there's too many characters.
Yeah.
And I've talked about that before. Like Annabelle Creation does that for me a little bit. And the original Conjuring actually does that for me a little bit to a degree too. Every character for the most part is important in some fashion. The one that's possibly a little out for me is John Patrick Thomas as Coop. But I still enjoy him in the role. He's not that extraneous. I only
wish that he didn't exist more to be like a friend for the family who turns on the family so quickly. That was the only thing that his character feels off for me on, because there's the big moment where, of course, after the kids get the marks, they're looked at by her own CPS people, and they come out and they're doing the welfare check, and he turns on her very quickly because he's like, whatever's happening here, you get it together.
Fix it. And it was like, well, yeah, but that's not what's happening. And you feel for her because now you're seeing exactly what what Patricia went through. Right. The isolation.
Yeah.
At that point, losing everything around you. And it actually, and it comes to full circle. One subtle thing I did like at one point is that the kids, and I think we'll get there after Raymond comes and does everything, they actually have to have them go into a closet to hide for the night. That was the idea at that point too. And it felt just like she's getting to that moment. Now she understands that at this point. But we'll get there. We'll get there soon. I think I do want to say this is when we meet Raphael in his shop. It's probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie. So right away, you get his humor. It's so apparent humor that kids aren't going to get the humor because he's so dry, so dead faced with it, but he does not act like a priest at all. And I love it. I'm here for it.
I love it so much. And what's so funny, and I used this word earlier, disarming. And this performance actually is almost disarming for the entire movie. And also kind of the universe in general. There is no character like him that feels so cut out of a different film and put here, but it's on purpose. It's just who he is as a person. Right. He is so blunt and no nonsense and dry and just kind of humorless. But if he's got humor, it's dark.
Right.
And
very dark.
It just is so different than anyone else in these movies. There's no character like it, and I love that it breaks that mold of the universe.
Ta-da!
Yeah. What a
so
great
good.
Yeah. Ta-da!
Ta-da! It's so good. It's so good. It's so perfect. And this actually makes me upset. I'm bringing it up again now that they're trying to say it's not part of the Conjuring universe, because I would love to see Raphael come back in a future Conjuring film, even a main film. Let's see, all of a sudden he shows up in a Warren investigation, having the Warrens work with him in a way. That'd be fucking good. That'd be fucking sweet, man. I gotta be honest with you. I love to see it. Love to see that.
I 100% would too, and I think that there's something to be said about the potential of doing that. Again, I wouldn't mind seeing Tony Amendola again. Like, there's these characters that I kind of like that they've built out that I would love to revisit. Even like we talked about with The Nun. I kind of want that Nun sequel because I'd like to hang out with Tessa and Damien again.
Yes, me too. Exactly. I think there's something to be said with you have a universe. Use it.
Yeah.
Use it. You have, the Warrens aren't the only people in town, so to speak. Let's branch that out a little bit. It's like the MCU has Cap and Iron Man, but like you have so much more around it. Use that.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, you don't want to do, and I mean this as lovingly as possible in one capacity, don't get like Star Wars where you're kind of just circling the same people. Like, you can branch out a little more, and it's taking Star Wars time to figure that out. Here you've got a lot of really good pieces. Use it. Expand it out a little bit, because I think you could do stuff with those characters in a universe that really, since the first two, is not, or I guess all three main Conjuring films are all true stories, even though they're clearly embellished by the time you get to the third.
Right. Those are the file of the Warrens, and I get that. But I don't think you need to hold true to that.
Right. That's what I mean.
Because the smart horror fan understands exactly what's going on, and they're not going to care if you create a new fictional storyline with them. Not at all.
Not at all. But I don't know. I digress, I guess, is what we're saying. Again, use what you have, but what do we know, Cody?
What do we know? Who do we know? Obviously nothing. But so we get more with them. Obviously, we actually jumped ahead a little bit. We saw Chris sleepwalking. We got the CPS visit. We do have the interesting bit. The hair rinsing bit comes up soon, where La Llorona almost drowns.
Yeah.
The daughter in the bathtub, which is a fine sequence. I will say this. I think this is where I want to say it. This with La Llorona, this is where you see in this scene, a couple scenes, you see the lesser budget, the $9 million budget. La Llorona is not as effective makeup wise. It almost feels chintzy and fake at times. It kind of distracts me a little bit, especially when you compare it to something like the makeup job they did for Valak, for example. Right. Valak I bought into 100%. La Llorona feels like a cheap imitation. She is a cheap imitation to a degree. She's just not a nun. That's the difference, really. It doesn't have the same feel. And again, even more of a reason to hold back with her.
And you know what's interesting? You bring that up, and this is something I was going to get into in this sequence, and kind of even to a point the first time we really saw La Llorona, where Linda Cardellini's yelling at her, "What are you doing in my house? What are you doing in my house?" Which that sequence feels very unnecessary in a lot of ways, because to your point, it does feel that lesser moment. But you know what? Also, this is Chavez has a little bit of an eye and feel for J horror. Mm-hmm. And that's the stuff that when you look at the original Darkwater, when you look at The Grudge, Ring You, all those J horror films, One Missed Call, that type of stuff was really popular in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they made so many of those movies, and all those ghost characters all kind of move and feel and interact with their worlds in the same way. There's a very distinct version of every version of those characters, but they all move similarly. They all have this very specific feel. La Llorona has that feel. There's something, a little bit of that breaking sounds and the movements, and they're a little jarring. It feels just off. It feels like the characters you see in The Grudge, or, that sort of thing. So I think that that's what he was trying to convey, but the problem is that if you hang on that on a budget like that, sometimes you start to see through the seams, and it's it doesn't work.
Yeah, agreed. And that's what it is. It's cheap conjuring tricks, as Gandalf would say, potentially. No pun intended there.
Right.
We did jump ahead a little bit. I think I missed it. This is where, at this point, where we have the second Father Perez scene, which is what leads them to actually going to Raphael. We just jumped ahead because we were excited about Raphael. But this is the second Father Perez scene. And this is where we get the actual footage
from Annabelle.
Actual footage from Annabelle. Footage from the universe that we're not connected to.
Including making sure that we're hanging on the Annabelle footage. There's that doll, a whole lot in the movie.
Right there, every bit of it. And it's like, really? And it makes me mad. It actually takes me out of the movie because I'm just like, well, there you go. I mean, I go back into it really quickly enough. But it's another great sequence. Father Tony Mandela is great. I'm glad we get to Raphael that way. The rest of the movie is basically sort of an action horror flick at that point.
100%.
It's a little bit of Nightmare on Elm Street. They're setting up, not traps, but they're setting up trying little things. They do the egg trick, which is cool. The Carson. I saw that on Carson. Did you see that on Carson? No. No, I did not. And I love the fact that Raphael uses him as bait. I think it's so great that his character is a maverick, that he will do this stuff because he needs to do it. I almost feel like, again, I want to see more from him. I want to see the adventures. I would watch a movie, The Adventures of Raphael.
I 100% would. And I really love that moment when she's so angry and she's like, you used my son as bait? And he goes, no. I used all of you as bait. And
How dare you?
It was like, well, did it work?
She's out of the house, isn't she?
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, shit. Yeah.
He's so no nonsense about it. It was like, I did what I had to protect you. And he's just such a different character because everyone else seems to be trying to hide and get as far away from this stuff as possible. Not him. No, he's like, punch it in the face and let's just deal with it.
But he's also still scared shitless of it, though. He's not like this, like, badass, I'm not going to be a badass Terminator. He's like, yeah, I'm pretty scared. Even though he says he's not. And I love that. He's like, are you scared? No, not at all. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Yeah. Because you see how his face half the time. But I love the fact that it is no nonsense. He's going to tell you exactly what he feels. And he's like, you asked me for help. This is me helping you. This is what you're going to get. Sorry if you don't like it. This is what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And, of course, my favorite moment, we both mentioned this together, after the kid does the stupid kid thing in the horror franchise. It always happens. And, gets the doll back. I mean, he point blank says that Llorona's going to try to get back in the house, going to try to break through the seeds or the fire seeds that he plants in front of the door that he is like a barrier that she can't get through. The little girl, it makes sense. It's in character.
Yeah, she cares about the doll.
Kid.
She cares about the doll.
Fuck them kids. Anyway, and that's what happens. She takes the doll back. And of course, not only did she take the doll back, she takes the doll back, turns, says, look, mommy, I got it. I didn't even mess up the things, as she's messing up the seeds, rather. Llorona comes in, takes her. And we have the great pool sequence, which I loved.
Yeah.
The pool sequence was very reminiscent of a lot of other previous dark water movies, which I kind of like. It reminded me a little bit of The Abyss, a little bit of things like that. Like it's a great moment when she's going back and forth. You know she's going to find her, whatever. But of course, the best part about it is, again, Raphael. What does he pull? How does he figure it all out? He fucking blesses the pool water, makes a whole pool full of holy water. What I want to know, how far does that trick go? Could he go stand in the Atlantic Ocean? And
that's what I'm wondering, right? Like how far, how powerful is Raphael? But I love that it's probably easily explained in guys, you're overthinking it. It's a small pool and he can do it in a small space. Fine. But it was I thought it was such a cool thing, and it's a little over the top for this universe, but at the same time, it's kind of not. We've seen some crazy
not for him
movies, and for him especially, probably not. So I just thought it was kind of a fun moment. Did it make him a superhero a little bit? Yeah. But
that's the best part about it. I think that's the best part about it is you kind of feel like he is so good. He's fallible. He's got the fear. He makes mistakes. He gets his ass kicked occasionally here and there. But you never know what he's going to do, and you know he's got a lot of stuff in his backpack that he can kind of throw at you.
100%.
And that word, you're like, fuck yeah, I love it. I was all in on that moment.
He's just such a good character. Raymond Cruz is so fun in this movie, man. And like I said, I think it's just the way that he is in the movie. It just feels so off kilter, and I love it.
Yeah. So the kids go to the closet at that point. Then, of course, Patricia shows up. We did hear before of Coop that they had to release Patricia because, obviously, we actually skipped over one sequence where Linda Cardellini goes visits Patricia in jail while they're holding her.
Yeah.
And it's a good sequence. They have a great
sequence.
Back and forth. They have a great back and forth with each other, the two strong female characters, and Linda kind of coming to more of a sensation of what's going on necessarily.
Well, there's a great moment in this that's so heartbreaking, and I just love the way that Patricia Velasquez does this. It's the way she looks at her and she goes, "When I was being taken away and I was praying, I wasn't praying to God. I wasn't praying to another higher being. I was praying to her to take your children and give me back mine."
Right.
And it's the way she says it, the way she delivers it, and you feel for her in that moment because she just wants her kids back, and she sees Cardellini as someone who is part of the reason they're gone. And so now she wishes that upon her, which leads to this great moment here later in the movie.
Yes. And it's well done to at that moment where she's kind of like, I know how you feel. Like, I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything anymore. I'm done with my feelings. Here's what I got to do to you. So that sequence is great. But of course, Coop relates to her later on that they had to let her go because she had an alibi.
Right.
And all of a sudden, like everything, like I wonder, you don't get anything more from the cops or the child protective part of it. What do they think at this point? I mean, they're like,
yeah, we never see them again, which makes them kind of like the most useless part of the movie, to be honest.
Irrelevant. Exactly. Pretty much irrelevant at that point. I'm not sure it would have made the movie better or not to have gotten more from them. Maybe from Coop jokes. I do like,
but maybe not. I mean, the cops are so. I don't know what they would even do at this point, other than Coop shows up in the middle of it, and maybe ultimately, this movie already plays a little bit with like the super god status of blessing an entire pool.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily think I want Coop showing up in the middle of what's going on and him trying to like shoot Llorona. Like maybe it's better he's not in it more. Because
maybe, but I think what would have worked better is because at the end of this film, and we're about to get there anyway, though, you got to realize that, like, despite everything that just went on, she's still under investigation.
Right.
Cops still think she did something wrong. That's not fixed. So having Coop show up there during this and seeing Llorona and seeing what's going on, I'm going, oh, fuck this. So this is what's going on. This is what she couldn't say. At least he's on her side again. And you know that, like, with that she could have gotten back to her normal life to a degree with help from Coop. Nah, but I don't know. Regardless, it's a horror film. I don't need to get too deep into it.
Yeah, we're thinking about it too much, probably.
Way too much. But it did pass through my mind a few times. So Patricia shows up at the house. Which how did she were they that close that she had been to the house before? Or she found the I don't know. Again, thinking too much on it. She shows up, wipes the beads, and like lets Llorona in. Like wants to like do everything she can and let it happen, make it happen. Even like puts locks Linda or Anna away for a bit, and the kids go up the attic with the mirror and everything else. And this is one of my least favorite sequences. He has the necklace. The son has the necklace that was La Llorona's, and I can't remember. I forgot how he got. I think she
Linda
found
Cardellini had grabbed it during the struggle with Llorona the first time and pulled it off.
That's right. So he has it, and somehow it's like a magic beacon. All of a sudden, where like she's like, oh, and she becomes this normal-looking woman again. And I just didn't like that aspect at all. I get what they're going for, but it took me out of the movie completely. I don't want to see her like that at this point.
No, and it's supposed to try to be a humanizing thing. Like, I get it. Like, they're trying to disarm the kids, and they're trying to make it, look, she's not what you thought this whole time. Like, I get it too, but kind of like you,
it's not effective.
I don't need it because I've already seen this character far too many times as the monster. I can't see
Right.
the genie being put back in the bottle, essentially.
It's way too late for that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's way too late for that. Honestly, when she killed her kids in the first scene, she killed her
Right.
own kids, no matter what's going on. It's tough to swallow. Now you're gonna have her like be like, are you trying to have a redemption or teasing redemption? It didn't work. It didn't work for me at all, and I was kind of like, okay, whatever.
I don't think I'll say this. I don't think it was supposed to be like a redeeming quality thing. I really do think it was more about trying to make the kid's guard go down and make them be like, oh, look, she's normal. Like, maybe we're wrong, right? And I think that's more what it's supposed to be. It's still not nearly as effective as it could be.
Right. But then Patricia finally makes the call so that she's doing something wrong and she can't do this, and she lets Anna back out. Anna goes, and we get the final where she gets stabbed with a crucifix made of the fire tree seed or whatever that was the same tree that Llorona grew up near or whatever, which seemed like a very, I don't know, the whole thing seemed a little like,
it seemed a little happening very fast, trying to wrap up the movie, just trying to get to the end. Like, clearly, again, it's just been kind of strung along. We can't make this go any longer, so this is what we're going to do.
Yeah. Well, that will finish it. We're good to go.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of thought put into it, and it becomes, again, a little superhero. It's a little too Conjuring 2 also, because of the way, the spiking of it all and things like that. It's fine. It kind of goes out on a whimper, if I'm honest. Like,
it does.
There's a couple of good character beats right at the end, again, with Raymond Cruz as Raphael.
Ta-da.
And a little bit of the stuff with Anna, but like for the most part, it just kind of whimpers out. Like it's a bummer in a way, because I think the build a lot of the time is very good, and then it was
That's it, huh? That's it, huh? That's what we got. Okay. Well, with that in mind, it actually seems like a good place to go through our franchise rankings and stuff and see where we would have ranked this bad boy. Do you want to read the rankings so far, or do you want to try to do it blindly, or what do you want to do?
I mean, look, so we're rating the movies because here, we go to 11 and all of that, and we kind of rank these movies.
Sure.
So we both gave Annabelle a 2.
Correct.
I think that this movie is significantly better than Annabelle. I think it's much more fun to watch. The one thing I said to you is that at least this movie, I never felt like I was wasting my time. Like, I was never bored. I was never waiting for the next sequence to see where it was trying to go. Like, even though it's stringing me along, I still enjoy it. And so for that, I'm going to bump it up a little bit. I think I could give this like a 6.
6. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
like,
solid.
It's a solid, like, mid-tier movie that I don't mind watching. Like, I could put it on. It's 90 minutes. I'm not really going to feel like I wasted my time, but I'm also not going to go out of my way to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's more of it's a rainy afternoon. All right, I'll watch this.
I decided to put this like straight down the middle in the middle.
Okay.
I give it a 5.5.
Okay. See, I told you we weren't far off.
We're not far off at all on this. It is, again, I agree with you. It is. I liked Annabelle Creation less than you. Actually gave Annabelle Creation a 6.
Right.
This almost meets that for me. I did like some things in Creation better. I think Creation did a lot more in terms of less showy, more.
Oh, definitely.
Exploring that kind of thing. I cared about that more. I think I might have cared about the characters more in Curse of La Llorona overall, though. I think that might be a big difference. I mean, why I bumped it up from like a 4 to a 5.5.
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely my least favorite besides the original Annabelle. But I don't think anything's going to top that. I've seen The Conjuring, though it makes me do it. I know I definitely like it better than Annabelle. Annabelle Come Home, I've heard good things about from you, so I don't know I don't think it's ever going to quite go that low. But, so yeah, that's where we are. Not bad. 5.5 and a 6. It's pretty straight on at this point.
Yeah, like I said, I think that the interesting thing is I think that Creation is going to be the one gap between both of ours where I'm not going to be able to figure out what happened there. Like, I just can't figure it out, because I think that I do this every week. I always predict where I think we're going to kind of be I think you're going to have the best time with Comes Home. I think it's going to have a lot of the stuff that you like from all the other ones, like smaller cast, like much more contained, but it's like a fun house. Okay. Like the movie's just fun. It feels almost like a theme park attraction. Okay. There's going to be one thing I think that's going to pull you out of the movie that was similar to the Scarecrow.
Okay.
But I think you're still going to like the movie a lot. Okay. But I think
do you like this one better than Creation or Lures on Creation? I mean, you don't have to rank it right now, but like your initial.
I like it. I think Creation's the scarier movie. I like this one more. I think this is this film that we're going into. Annabelle Comes Home is the most fun this franchise ever has, and it may be the most fun the franchise will ever be because I think they really leaned in on let's just go for broke and make like a fun house movie.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it. I will say, I'm looking at the rankings from Scream and The Conjuring. I'm waiting for the film where we are diametrically opposed because we are the closest, the furthest we've been is Annabelle Creation, where you gave it an 8 and I gave it a 6. That's the furthest away we've been. Like I don't know. Like I guess that says a lot about us in a way.
Yeah. But I kind of like that because a lot of the time it means that we're actually very like, yeah, man, right? That's great. Not that I'm saying that I don't like butting heads and stuff, but when it comes to enjoying things, it's a lot more fun for me to like nerd out and be like, I agree with you. Be
positive about it. Right. I agree. I would like to see it happen once, though. I'd like to see like one really massive throwdown.
No, you don't.
Or just I
don't want to be mean, and I get mean.
I can handle you being mean because I can get mean myself. It's okay. It's okay. We'll handle it. But not this week, obviously.
Not here.
All right. Well, that will do it for this week's episode. I believe next week we will do like the aforementioned Annabelle Comes Home. I think we might need to take a 1 week off before coming back for the finale of the Conjuring franchise, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, because we'll be in Los Angeles for the movie trivia schmodown.
Us? What?
Yeah. We are. It's big taping days coming up soon. So that's why we actually got to leave this podcast show tonight and go do some more work on questions because that's what we're doing at this point.
It's fair.
Even after the 434 questions we wrote for the Free for All. Yeah, that's right. That's right, guys. That's
434 questions, and you guys are.
We might have gone overboard.
180.
We might have been overboard. That's okay. That's what we do. Okay, so next week you can find also I did have a Crown Jewels go this week. We had the Crown Jewels this week's episode coming up. You just heard talking about son and daughter. Next week you'll hear me talking about Jesus. You'll also find me on Scoundrels Weekly with Richard Dark Jarvie and Maddie Gunner. Actually, you'll have seen us yesterday. We're on Tuesdays for the next couple of weeks. Tuesdays might be a permanent change. We found it worked for a lot of us better, so Tuesdays end up might being a permanent change. I'll have to get back to you on that. And of course, I already told you about the movie Trivia Schmodown and also Action Industries, Ben Bateman, Andrew Guy. I work with them on quite a few things. One last thing I will say, patreon.com/PLD Projects is in. We are going. We have some great patrons with us already. I can't say enough about them. We already did a Patreon.
You've clearly not said enough at all. You're giving them no love, and they're here helping you.
I am giving them love. I'm giving them much love. We actually did a Patreon show, though it wasn't actually a Patreon exclusive show. Our first episode of Two Mediocre White Idiots in a Box, but the next episode will be Patreon exclusive.
Join us.
We're going to be going over The Waters of Mars, the David Tennant special that I really wanted to get into. One of my favorites, so I can't wait to watch that. That'll be sometime next month. But I want to shout out again my patrons that are at a certain level. They deserve to get their shout outs. They are as follows. My producers, Brandy Parker, Jeff Alterman, Kelly W., John Lestrina. My executive producers, Danielle Ramirez and Brandon Buckingham. Thank you guys. We salute you and we appreciate your
those about to rock. We salute you.
Exactly. So there we are on that. I want to do some more for that. But yeah, until then, I guess next time, keep staying mediocre, everybody.
Don't ever change. Be the most mediocre you possible. And we love you for it.
Never underestimate the power of mediocrity. Take care, guys.